We love music, and we go into music because we cannot imagine any other life. And I'm not saying it's necessarily the best life, but it's the only life I can imagine. And the students who come in here, I think that's sort of at the core. That's why they come here to study and work all these hours a day. So I think it's important that then we have to teach our students to actually articulate that. My groundwork of everything that I teach is like music and technique is the same. So nothing can be beautiful if it's out of tune. You cannot shape or create a beautiful musical gesture if you don't have a fluid and organized form. So as far as I'm concerned, music and technique is the same. So everything that I teach, everything that I talk about is with that idea in mind. And I'm very, I guess, conservative when it comes to sort of loving Sevcik and Schradik and scales and double stops. And at any given time, I like my students to be doing sort of three separate things. You have the repertoire, the concertos and the Bach and the showpieces and sonatas and stuff like that. And then I do, even my most advanced students, I do a fair amount of just like sort of pure techniques. Because I firmly believe, and I see this from great players that I know, but also from professional athletes, it doesn't matter how advanced you are, you can never neglect the basics. And I tell my students this in perspectives, it's like, it's a very competitive field and it's very cutthroat, so you have to put in that work. However, the subject is pure and beautiful. There's nothing wrong with Mozart, there's nothing wrong with Bartok or Beethoven. Everything about the way I run my studio is based on that. And so I want to have incredibly sort of an intensive and rigorous atmosphere because it's all about the music. And my job and my only desire is to help the students reach their full potential. So that means that it has to be a very intensive, rigorous environment, but it has to be positive. I use my studio classes as seminars, and those are purely performance classes. And then I do a lot of things sort of within the studio. For instance, I break my studio into 4 small units, and they meet once a week in my office and play actually their scale and etudes for each other. And actually there's a lot of beautiful things that happen there by sort of observing each other. Like, you know, if there's a student who admires somebody's vibrato, they strive for that, to get that. So I try to do that. I also, one thing that I think is important is like when I assign a piece to a person, then very often I will tell them, before you come to my first lesson, why don't you play for so-and-so who just studied Dvorak Concerto very carefully with me last year. So then the new student gets the initial lesson, and then the other one who just studied Dvorak has to actually articulate or remember what we talked about. And then when I've then worked on the Dvorak Concerto and we decide it's time to move on, and when I give somebody else a Dvorak Concerto, I will have them play for that student. So I like to do as much sort of a playing for each other. And there's, right now I'm very pleased, like in my studio, there is a great culture of actually seeking each other out in the practice room and just say, oh, do you mind if I play the first page of the chaconne for you to see if it's memorized or, you know, things like that. So that is kind of the things that I try to do to foster kind of a positive yet rigorous environment in the studio. That's it. My responsibility to the students is them and them realizing their full potential. But for me to become a better teacher and to continue growing as a musician, because it's a lifelong thing, it's important that I try to perform on campus. Us teachers, we serve in many ways as a role model in terms of musicianship and professional conduct and commitment. So if I'm telling my students that I need them to be fully committed to music, I need to do that myself. And I just find it, you know, when I leave town and play with wonderful musicians, you know, then I get inspired and I learn something. So then I come back and I try to implement that. What I've just loved here and what the students, just by the nature that they're here and who their peers are, who their roommates in college, in their dorms are, who they're eating lunch with, is that I think for the conservatory students, their sort of minds open up in a very, I think, pretty profound way just by who they see around. And also that it's so easy to make these connections, which is not always in a bigger city. It's more complicated. So that I think is very powerful. And I think that's also has prepared why Oberlin students seem to be so entrepreneurial and have such success. not only sort of traditional jobs like orchestra teaching jobs, but simply creating jobs or career opportunities. And I think it comes from here, that like all these resources are at their fingertips. They are surrounded by such smart people who are so passionate, not just about music, but all different fields. And it's at the core of what Oberlin is about. So then when they go into the real world, I think it's just so natural for them to kind of think outside the box and also just make connections. And that is something that I personally have enjoyed, just like this rich cultural and intellectual community. And then I think the students actually thrive on it. And like I said, it really benefits them when they are finding their, carving out their career paths, whatever that may be.